The talk is on getting started with GitOps using Argo CD Autopilot. Very cool project. Just to introduce myself, my name is Dan Garfield. I'm a co-founder and chief technology evangelist. I'm actually, I got my old title on here. I'm the co-founder and chief open source officer for Codefresh. Launched the company about 5 years ago, and we've been.
Hey Dan,
Yeah.
if you're the co-founder, does that mean you can give yourself promotions like that automatically?
Yeah, on the fly without, yeah, I don't even need to ask. I just get going. Yeah, I recently took on a new role to focus on open source and basically doing a lot of changing the way that we operate as a business and changing the way that we engage with the community. So it's really interesting stuff, but not the topic of today. You can obviously follow Codefresh at Codefresh on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Today Was Awesome. And would love to hear your feedback. And if you have any jokes, love to get your jokes sent to me on Twitter as well. That'd be fabulous. They're very welcome. For those of you that are unfamiliar with GitOps, GitOps is a term that has been around for a few years now. And what's happened over the last few years is a lot of people have talked about GitOps, and people have said, well, I'm doing GitOps because I commit to Git, and that ends with something being deployed, therefore I'm doing GitOps. And there have been a number of different ideas and strategies related to operations by pull request. This is how the idea started. And so at the end of last year, an effort was begun to actually formalize the principles of GitOps. And this was done in collaboration with Codefresh, GitHub, Azure, Red Hat, Weaveworks, and Amazon. What we wanted to do is we wanted to come together and define a standard for how GitOps works and how it should be done. We wanted to do this because, gosh, looking back at DevOps, we've seen that term get kicked around and mean so many different things. We've found so many different different terms get taken over and run in too many directions. And what we wanted to do with GitOps is make something that was very clearly defined, that really succinctly brought together all of the best practices and information that people had, and was something that is a standard that you can hold up against your business and say, okay, where are we at in adopting this? And for someone like Amazon, is our infrastructure compliant with this stuff? Can we actually offer, compliant infrastructure? So this is a CNCF project. Currently within the sandbox, there's the GitOps working group has created the Open GitOps standard. We're currently at version 0.1, and there's actually a 0.2 currently in pull request. So if you want to get engaged and go and see the principles in action, you can check out the GitHub. Go to opengitops.dev and you can get all the links there. But I'll take you through the principles here really quickly to introduce you to how this stuff works. So the first principle is a principle of declarative desired state. What does this mean? Well, this should be familiar to those who are aware of infrastructure as code, but it actually goes beyond that, because it's not just infrastructure as code, it's also application as code. It's also all of the layers that you need to run your application. And what we've seen a lot of with infrastructure as code is people have said, well, I've got my infrastructure is described as code. Maybe I have Terraform or whatever, and this stands up the things, and then people can deploy to it. Well, GitOps says you should actually go a level further. You should have everything completely declare in a declarative state, so you can describe exactly how you want it to be running and how it should be working. And when you do that, it really opens up the door to be way more effective. Now, this goes back to why we adopt GitOps at all. Engineering teams, organizations that adopt GitOps deploy more often, experience fewer regressions, and have more reliable software. So the teams are happier, they're deploying more often, they're getting more value to the business, the businesses are more successful, and they're dealing with fewer regressions. And if they do deal with regression, the time to remediation is typically dramatically shorter because they've followed these four principles that I'm laying out here. So the principle of declarative desired state should be relatively straightforward for most of you that have been doing DAOs for a long time. We take it a little bit step further than just infrastructure as code. It's actually a little bit more inclusive. And so this principle is critical in order to achieve the other principles. And by the way, as we talk, feel free to throw stuff in the questions or in the chat. I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on it, and would love to, jump in the middle of the talk and have a discussion. Principle number 2 is that we need to be using immutable storage for these desired versions. This should be version controlled and immutable. Now, what does that mean in practice? Most of the times it means Git, but GitOps isn't just for Git. It could be for Perforce. You can use any version controlled immutable storage system that's in order to apply these principles. So first, you have everything described declaratively, then you have it stored in an immutable storage location, and you have it versioned. Why is that important? Well, if I have a regression, I can now go back one commit and actually deploy that, and I will be safe. Now, in order for that to work, let's say you're using Kubernetes, does that mean you can use the latest tag on your images? Well, probably not, because there's not going to be no difference between those versions when you're doing a release. So, there's kind of sort of implied principles engaged in here as well. Principle 3 is the principle of continuous state reconciliation. Now, what this really means is that you have essentially an agent running on your infrastructure, your production infrastructure, your test infrastructure, wherever, and that agent is continually checking and saying, what's the current actual state of this, and what's the desired state of this? And it's going to attempt to reconcile that continuously. Now, this is different. So for example, if you're doing continuous delivery or continuous deployment, you can do that using GitOps, or you can do that in other ways. Now, a lot of people will have like a trigger where once this is approved or someone says deploy, this then goes through and fires some sort of webhook that triggers a connection to be made to production, which then pushes the changes on. Continuous state reconciliation is a pull operation rather than a push operation. It means there's a component sitting on the infrastructure that is looking for changes, and it's pulling those changes up and putting them there. Now, the other reason this would be different than just a vanilla, continuous delivery kind of process is that because the state reconciliation is continuous, that means that if there's some kind of drift that occurs within your production, that change will actually be picked up, and the desired state will be reapplied. Now, that's valuable from a security perspective, but it's also valuable from a stability perspective, because if somebody's making changes manually, or if there's something getting out of whack, you can rely on these agents to continuously bring back and say, nope, that's not the desired state. We're going to set the desired state right now, and we're going to make sure that that's what's applied to production. So principle number 3 is very important. That pull versus push operation changes things dramatically, especially when you think about scale and like how you deal with edge devices, how you deal with clusters that are on different networks, those kinds of things. It makes a big impact. Number 4 is the principle of operations through declaration. Now, what this means is that the only way that you should be operating a system is via these declarations. So I basically should make a change, I should commit it, and it should be recorded into Git, and that is the only thing that should be making the change happen. The agent will pick up that the desired state has changed, and will then go and apply that state to the infrastructure that it's connected and managing to. It also changes the way you think about secrets, because instead of having keys to your production cluster maybe sitting in a repo, even if it's encrypted or keys like that, the infrastructure itself actually just has keys to pull from where the repo is defining the things. And so that means that your attack surface is smaller from a security standpoint. So that's better. So these operations through declaration. Now, is there a case where something goes terribly wrong and you might need somebody to connect to production? Maybe. That's not GitOps though. So if that happens, that's the kind of thing that you should have, a retrospective on to understand why that happened and to make sure that doesn't happen again, because we don't want any changes to be made manually. We don't want anybody connecting to things manually. We don't want people to have manual keys floating around. All those things create issues and create problems. And if you actually follow these principles, what it enforces is good practices throughout your software development and delivery process. And it also enforces really good security best practices. Now, this isn't the whole shebang. There's more that you're going to need to do. Probably you're going to need to do continuous integration over here somewhere. Great. You probably don't want to do security scanning somewhere. Awesome. But if you apply these principles, you'll avoid a lot of headache and you'll be able to deploy more often, because if you can actually apply these principles, then a deployment should be a relatively painless thing, because all you're doing is changing the desired state and allowing the agents to apply that desired state. Now, in the past, those agents were essentially people, and people make mistakes. So this is an automated system. It's going to make fewer mistakes. So that's kind of a quick intro to GitOps. We went through that relatively quickly, and so hopefully it's nice and clear. And again, throw your questions, throw your comments, throw your blow up the chat here. Love to see it. What we're going to design here is basically a system, and we're going to focus on the GitOps kind of components of it. But what we recommend is actually a 2-repo approach. You have a repo with your application code. This is where your developers are working most of the time. They're building the application, they're making changes, whatever, the service is being updated. And once that's ready to go, you then make a pull request onto a runtime repo. And your runtime repo basically includes all your infrastructure as code stuff and how to run the application. And so when the application is updated, the app code is updated, maybe this generates a new image, sets a new tag, and then creates a pull request onto your runtime repo and says, hey, here's the new image that needs to be deployed, or it could be even for scale changes or anything like that. And once that runtime code has been updated, your operator is going to pick up that change and it's going to apply it to your application. Now here I'm talking about Kubernetes. Are any of the principles that I laid out unique to Kubernetes? No. GitOps is for infrastructure. It is for how you run your applications, period, regardless of Kubernetes. Now, Kubernetes happens to be like a really fantastic platform for doing this, and Kubernetes makes it really easy, but GitOps is for all kinds of infrastructure, not just for Kubernetes, even though Kubernetes does make it very easy and straightforward to implement. Now, we're going to be using Argo to do this for our agent. And for those that aren't familiar with Argo, I'll just jump over and show you. This is the Argo website. Basically, there's a set of open source tools that help you get things done with Kubernetes. Argo Workflows is a tool for running workflows. Argo CD is what we're going to be using. This is a continuous delivery tool. Argo Rollouts is for doing canary deployments, blue-green deployments, those kinds of things. And Argo Events is for setting event-based dependency management. So huge community of users using this, very popular product. It has a very high net promoter score. It's one of the top new tools in the last few years. And this is an open source project that Codefresh is working on and helping maintain. So this is like, if you want to use the open source version of Codefresh, you can think of Argo as the open source version of Codefresh. So let's get into this. And what I'm going to do, we're going to set up this flow that I just talked about, where we have a runtime repo. We're going to focus on the runtime repo and the an Argo operator, and we're going to set up and deploy an application. And it's going to go very smoothly, I'm sure. I'm just going to set and make sure that I do need to set a Git token in my environment, which I will do here. And I need to set my repo token here, and then I can clear my window. Good, clear here. Okay, so we should be good to go. Let me change which window I'm sharing. All right, so now you should be looking at my terminal window. You can see I'm in an empty Git repo that I have I set up before this, and I've also set up two Kubernetes clusters. What we're actually going to do today, one of the questions that comes up as people adopt GitOps is, how do I deal with multiple environments? How do I go from staging to production? Do I need to have a different Git repo for each one? Do I need to have a different directory for each one? How do I handle that? And when people go to set up their Git repo, Argo is a very fantastic tool, but it's fairly flexible too. And so you don't necessarily know how you should set up your repo. So this is why we built a tool called Argo CD Autopilot. And Argo CD Autopilot is part of the Argo Labs, which is part of the Argo project. You can see Argo CD Autopilot's here. It's a fairly new project. And basically what it does for you is it will create and set up your repo for you. It'll install Argo CD, and it will set up everything you need to make changes from one environment and then promote them to another environment using Customize. Strongly encourage you to go check this out. The Git repo is pretty straightforward about how to do this, but I'm going to give you the quick demo, like I said. So let's get into it. So I'm currently connected to my staging cluster. Move my window around a little bit, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bootstrap my repo. Autopilot repo bootstrap. Now I just showed you that the directory is empty, and if I run this command, what it's going to do is it's going to connect to my Git. It's going to create, it's going to connect to the Kubernetes cluster that I'm currently on, and it's going to deploy Argo CD on that cluster, and then it's going to take all of the code that was used to define how Argo CD was deployed, and it's going to put it into a repo for me. Why is this important? Well, it's pretty funny. Most people that use Argo CD end up installing it manually, and then they do GitOps from there. But if you don't have Argo CD itself managed through GitOps, are you doing GitOps? Well, no, I would say you're probably not actually doing GitOps. So this is installing the components, and we can even look and just see how the pods are going here. We can see some of them are running, some of these are still creating, that's fine. Once these are up, you'll see that it's actually will pass readiness, and then it will take and actually write this all back to my repo. So this will allow me, if I wanted to manage Argo CD, I can do that. I'm going to save this password here, and we'll set up a port forward. These are the same size, okay. So now I can go to my local host 8080, switch my window so you can see. And where did I put my password? Here it is. Admin. There we go. So you can see that everything is now in sync. You can see it was actually finishing syncing a couple items there. If we look at our repository and we refresh this, you can see we just created all of these folders here. So within Bootstrap, you have Argo CD instance and the root application. These are using Customize, and so it's created all my manifests and everything for me, so it knows exactly what needs to happen. All very straightforward. Nothing under my apps folder, that's empty, and nothing under my projects folder because I haven't created any projects yet. So let's get into that. Go into my terminal. And now we're going to create a Argo CD Autopilot, and we're going to do a project create staging. I don't need to pass any arguments onto this because what it's going to do, it's Argo Autopilot is all about smart defaults. So this is looking, okay, where I've deployed this CD instance, that's where I want that's where I want this project to manage. So this is managing my staging cluster. So if I look at this, you can see that I've now created everything, and under my projects, I now have a staging YAML. I actually have a new staging folder that's telling me exactly what's going on there. So if I look at my staging instance, let me just show you what's in that file. I'll do this in the browser, just keep it simple. You can see this is actually set some good defaults for me. You can see that it's actually destination is set to the same cluster that it's currently on. It's in an Argo CD namespace. This one is called staging, and it's set some other defaults for me. So let's go back to terminal here. So now that I've created a project, I can actually create my application. So I'm going to do Argo CD Autopilot, and we're going to do app create demo app. And you can see I'm actually specifying a repository for where this application is defined. Now what it's going to do is it's going to create a customized overlay. For those of you that haven't used Customize, this is a tool somewhat similar to Helm. It's a Kubernetes manifest management tool, does templating and does overlays. So this is going to take the base files of how this infrastructure is defined in the application repo, and it's going to create in my infrastructure repo an overlay for that. I'll show you what that looks like. So, oh wait, my project is not set. Okay, well, let's set the project, I guess. Project staging. I think you do it with just a single P flag too. All right, so now that that's happened, if we go back and look at Argo, we can see that this staging app has just been picked up in Git and is now deploying. So it's progressing, and this will be deployed, and it's already deployed. So there we go. If we go back over and look at our Argo, our demo, our Autopilot demo repo, you can see we now have a demo app under apps, and we have a base, which is telling us where this is actually pulled from. And we can see that it has an overlay for staging, which is currently blank. There's nothing new that has been overlaid onto this for staging instance. So let's go back over and we'll create this in production as well. So let's see, let's do.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
If we could also finish up in about 1 or 2 minutes, we have one more talk after you to finish up and summarize this.
Okay, you got it. So, well, let's go super fast. We're going to create our production instance, project create prod, and you can see I already have my cluster defined here, my production cluster that I've already got set up. This is actually creating a standalone kind of component within the production cluster that's going to connect back to this repo that we just set, and then we'll create the Autopilot app create demo app. We'll do this app now in staging, and you'll see all of this get picked up in the repo, but I'll show you just how to make the change here briefly. So you can see production is now deploying. So now how do I make changes across environments? Well, it's very simple. If I go to my staging instance, my staging overlay here, and I go to my customization, and I edit that. I'm going to do this directly rather than pull requests for the sake of time. I deploy a new image, update image, and this overlay is going to take my base files, and it's going to apply that into my staging instance. And then to promote those changes from staging to production, I would just do the same thing in production. So really straightforward. You can see how this works. Check out Argo CD Autopilot. This is an Argo Labs project, and you can find it there. And then feel free to hit me up on Twitter @todaywasaawesome. Would love to hear from you. I know we had to rush through the end. Sorry about that. Bad time management on my part, but hopefully you learned something. You learned a little bit about GitOps, and you learned how easy it is to get your repos up and running. Strongly encourage you to try this for yourself because you can see it's fairly straightforward. It's really simple, but it's incredibly powerful, and it really will change the way that you deploy software.